Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden. This guy over here is Tim, and you are on The Second Legacy, and thank you so much for stopping by. Today, we have another live caller session. If you guys want to be on the show, like what you're about to see, make sure you check out the Google form in the description box down there. Fill it out. We'll get in touch, and you can be on the show and jump into the conversation, because that's the entire point, is getting the everyday person's opinion on the Second Amendment, where we're going, how we can go forward, and that's what this is all about. And thank you so much for watching and just being involved. If you like the content, make sure you like, subscribe to the video, and make sure that notification bell is on. I'm going to get right into this call in 1 second after a brief word from our sponsor. Now, the vest you're seeing me wear is from BulletSafe, and they've sponsored these videos. BulletSafe is on a mission to be the #1 provider for safety equipment such as this for not only the civilian, but also the security market. Now, the VP3 that I'm wearing comes in at $299.97, which makes it completely affordable and provides up to or better than Kevlar protection. This thing is NIJ level 3 tested. You are talking about up to 44 Magnum stopping on this bad boy. They've made it concealable, discreet, comfortable, and breathable. It's modular and upgradable, and in comparison to previous models, it's 50% thinner and 25% lighter. As you can see, I'm wearing in the filming of this spot, and it is not even adding to any of my dexterity whatsoever. This is something very concealable, and if you're in the market, this might be something just for you, and thank you to BulletSafe for making this content possible. All right, and so with that, we are going to dive into our caller today, Nikayu. Nikayu, thank you so much for calling in, man. What you got for me and Tim?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm huge fans of you both. You helped change my views on the Second Amendment a lot. My main question is that I'm 19, so I know a lot of high schoolers, and they're starting to conflate, the constitutional right to freedom of movement with gun control, because they say, well, you have, the government can regulate cars and give out licensings and stuff. Whenever I try to argue that the Second Amendment, there should be no restrictions on it.
Okay, so Let me kind of frame that from a high perspective so we can address that, because there's a couple of things that you hit there, and this is a really good one. It's a really good question. But basically, the idea is, how do you address to the younger generation the differences between regulation of cars through things like insurance and licensing and conflating it to the Second Amendment rights? And how do we combat that? That's kind of your perspective or your point?
Exactly. That is exactly my point, sir.
All right. Well, first of all, I really want to revisit this after we address this question, but I'm curious. First of all, thank you for your kind words about both of our channels, but I'm curious how we helped change or shape. So we'll go back to that in a second. But Tim, do you want to start this off with the car thing? Because I know you've heard this forever.
I've heard it for a long, long time. This goes back to, anti-gunners have been trying to use arguments like this for some time, and you'll see them continue to do it, much like what you're seeing with your classmates. And it's really a simple answer. Driving a car is not a constitutionally protected right. So the Second Amendment is acknowledging, it doesn't give us our right, but it acknowledges our right to keep and bear arms. And so our founding fathers found that this was extremely important. That's why it's number 2. Now, there was a debate whether or not it should be number 1 or number 2, and they decided that we should first voice our opinions and then fall back to the Second Amendment if things weren't going as they should be going. And so the Second Amendment is a safety rail. It's there to make sure that we always have the power of government in our hands, the people's hands. And so to say that, well, we license cars and we license boats and you got to get a fishing license to fish, it just makes sense that we should, impose some sort of a litmus test, and we should make sure that people are competent to exercise their rights, and we should license them, and people shouldn't have a problem with that because we do this with cars. Again, a car is not a constitutionally protected right. That's a privilege. And so when we start dealing with rights are something you're born with. It's something, in theory, that no other person can take away from you. And so the way the Second Amendment is worded is crystal clear. The other 9 amendments of the original 10 aren't worded as sharply as the Second Amendment. Shall not be infringed exists nowhere else in the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. So that's pretty strong verbiage. Even in today's English-speaking world, where we've redefined many things, including democracy.
Other things.
And other things, we still don't have, there's still no ambiguity in the statement, shall not be infringed. And so this is the point we have to drive home with the anti-gunners. Now, if they don't like it, I understand that. You're free not to like something. But to try to use the argument that I don't like it, therefore it should be licensed, that's not a logical argument. So I would ask them if they understand the difference between a right and a privilege. And if they say that they do, if they answer affirmatively, then say, well, then why are you struggling with this? Because the Second Amendment enshrines a right. Driving a car is a privilege that the government can take away from you at any time because it's not a protected item. I don't want them taking it away, but they could. And they do for many people. You go out and drink and drive, you'll probably lose your license. Drive irresponsibly, speed all the time, you're probably going to lose your license. It's a privilege. And so that's how I would approach that argument with your classmates and see what the response is.
You know what? And kind of to stack on that, because that's a very, very good approach. Like Tim just mentioned, we hear this a lot, right? So if you're coming up on the back end, like the next generation, and you're encountering these arguments and you're talking with people your age, the coolest thing about our rights, the coolest thing about our culture, the coolest thing about our country is all of these rights, they pass to that next generation and a debate ensues almost like it's done for generation after generation after generation. And so you're hearing these things and you're like, okay, this is an interesting perspective, and it's trying to filter down from the left, the top wings of the left side of the argument, right? But the interesting thing about it is, as Tim said, yeah, it's a privilege versus a right, but sometimes it's helpful to bounce out from a different perspective. Because the big thing that they're trying to do, and not your classmates, the left who is feeding these points, they try to go down the road of put something scary in place and then say, well, why isn't something scary regulated just like a car? It makes sense. So if you back that out and you take away the Second Amendment and put in the First Amendment, ask them the exact same question that they just asked you around rights versus privileges and licenses for cars and licenses for freedom of speech, and see what their answer is. Because I guarantee you they will pause a second.
Yeah, they'll have that blank look on their face for a second. And you do the same thing with the Fourth Amendment. Should you go to the government, pay a $200 tax before you can be secure in your property? Does the government get to arbitrarily decide who gets to exercise the Fourth Amendment or the Fifth Amendment or the First Amendment? No, they don't get to. That's because those are rights. Those are enshrined in the Constitution. So, yeah, I would definitely approach that with your classmates using that perspective and see what the response is.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm curious, Nakayu, what do you think about those perspectives?
The things you just said?
Yeah.
I agree with them wholeheartedly. I tried pointing that out to my peers, but you'd be surprised about some of them.
I'm not. I know how strong
honestly.
It is.
Yeah, the power is strong with these ones, and I totally get it. But you know what? That's a really great question. It's a really great point. I guarantee you, people your age are asking that same question, so you're not alone. But I'm curious, Nakayu, when you said earlier that Tim and I kind of changed your perspectives, what did you mean by that? Like, what was the original perspective? Because I'm really curious about this. This is something that we really focus on is the impact. What is it? So I'm curious if you have a thought on it.
Well, in school, one of my teachers was heavily anti-gun, like no AR-15s is a complete FUD. And I mean, I liked guns, they were cool, but before high school, I never had a political opinion, really. And I started doing research into what the Constitution and the Founding Fathers wanted. And I agree wholeheartedly with what they mean. We should have the same arms as the government. But my teachers were always like, oh, the government's not coming to take your guns, even though they stated several times they want to do that. Or, oh, no one needs an AR-15 for hunting, even though 223 was a small varmint round and other stuff. And I just started Googling on YouTube, and your channel popped up, Braden's, Brendan Herrera's, a bunch of other people too.
And so that kind of, I guess what you're saying is that kind of bolstered your original deductions were basically reinforced by things that we had done videos on. Is that kind of what you're alluding to?
100%, sir.
That's awesome, dude. I appreciate that. Like that, just a moment on that's powerful stuff. I appreciate you telling us that, man.
Yeah, it kind of vindicates us in what we're trying to do and trying to spread the message of the Second Amendment, because I think if left alone and people aren't vocal about the importance of the Second Amendment, all the amendments, but specifically the second, because that's what we deal with on our channels. If we don't have that conversation, if we don't educate people, it's very easy to walk away from your rights. And that's what the government's banking on. It's something that we call incrementalism. And what the government does is it uses propaganda. It propagandizes people. It tells them that their rights are bad, that you don't really need them, that it's not really a right. And then you're just willing to kind of give it up and walk away from it. But it takes generations to do that. So that's what we're seeing with your generation. My generation was firmly planted in the Second Amendment. Guns were everywhere and they're just normal. Nobody talked about them. Nobody cared about them. We even were able to take them to school because we went hunting after school. Well, that's changed. But the conversation has also changed. And they're using this propaganda to reach out to the youth so that the youth will surrender their rights willingly. And then your children, if they don't have guns, if they're taken away, God forbid, your children are born into a world where guns aren't allowed in the United States, well, they're never going to fight for something they never had. They won't miss it. They never had it. And that's what the government's trying to do with its incremental approach to taking our rights away. They're going to start off with taking magazines away. They're going to start off taking AR-15s away. They're going to take away anything they possibly can. And then once they get that, they're going to say, well, we're not trying to take your guns away. We just don't think these weapons of war should be on the street. Well, then they get the AR-15s and the crime continues because it's not a gun problem. It's a people problem.
Correct.
And then they're going to say, well, we thought we could leave you with the revolvers and the 10-shot pistols, but apparently you can't behave yourself with those either. So we're going to take those away next. And they're going to keep going down that path until they get them all, because they're lying to your face when they say we don't want to take your guns. And we've documented that on previous videos. We can use their own words against them. All the staunchest anti-gunners out there, the people that advocate it for the most, have openly said, either intentionally or caught on a hot mic, that they would absolutely take your guns away if they had the opportunity. Dianne Feinstein famously said it. Then she tried to walk it back and say, that's not what I really meant.
Or Gabby Giffords did like 4 or 5 days ago. She actually said no more guns and then listed Australia as a perfect model. I mean,
then you got David Hogg.
Yeah, and then Davey Hogg, who is just Davey Hogg.
Ban them all. No, wait. I went shooting shotguns yesterday. Look at me. I'm a gun guy. I don't want to take your guns away. You should have double-barrel shotguns. We just don't need AR-15s.
Exactly.
They just flip-flop all over the place until they get what they want, which is absolutely a ban. They're lying to you if they say that's not what they want.
But now we've got these brand new shiny Gen Z TikTokers talking about gun control. But that is for another video, and I'm sure, Nakayu, that you have seen those as well. Tim, you want to take us out, and then we will bounce?
Absolutely. Nakayu, thank you so much, my friend, for watching the channel, for calling in and bringing such a great question to the table. I hope other people take a look at that, because it is a very popular argument, but it's also full of logical fallacies. It just doesn't hold water if you look at it objectively. And again, as I've said before, if you don't like the Second Amendment, great. Get a convention of the states together and take it away if you think you can. You can't, but good luck trying. Until then, you have to recognize the fact the Second Amendment is there, and it does protect an individual right to self-defense and to keeping and bearing arms. All right, Nakayu, thank you so much for calling in. Folks, if you'd like to join the channel and get on this live call-in, please do. Again, there's a Google Doc in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you guys soon.